The distant whistle of a locomotive mingled with the dust that hung in the summer air as Clara Nolan trudged along the narrow path from the creek to the modest farm she called home. The year was 1876, and Sweetwater, Arizona Territory, had not seen rain in nearly 2 months. The weight of the 2 wooden buckets she carried made her arms tremble, water sloshing over the sides despite her careful steps, darkening the parched earth beneath her worn boots. Clara had come west with her father 3 years ago, following the promise of affordable land and new beginnings after her mother's passing. At 22, she had grown accustomed to the harsh realities of frontier life. But today, the oppressive heat combined with her exhaustion made the half-mile journey from the creek seem impossible. She paused, setting the buckets down to wipe the perspiration from her brow with the back of her hand. Her cotton dress clung to her skin, and wisps of auburn hair escaped from beneath her bonnet. Clara drew a deep breath and bent to lift the buckets once more, determined to reach home before the water became too warm to be refreshing. As she straightened, her ankle twisted on a stone hidden beneath the dust. Clara gasped, losing her balance and tumbling forward. The buckets overturned, precious water spilling across the thirsty ground. She landed hard, pain shooting up from her ankle as she hit the dirt. "Damn it all," she muttered, fighting back tears of frustration. The creek was still a quarter-mile back and home nearly as far ahead. Her ankle throbbed painfully as she attempted to stand. "Whoa there, miss. Don't be trying to get up just yet." The deep voice startled her. Clara turned to see a tall figure approaching on horseback, silhouetted against the brilliant blue sky. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his movements suggesting a lifetime in the saddle. As he approached, she could see he was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Dust covered his clothes, indicating he'd been riding for some time. His face was tanned from the sun, but his eyes were a surprising shade of blue that reminded Clara of the summer sky just before dusk. "Are you hurt?" he asked, crouching beside her. "It's nothing serious," she replied, attempting to sound braver than she felt. "Just a twisted ankle." "I'll be fine in a moment." "Let me help," he offered, and before she could protest, he was examining her ankle with gentle hands. "I'm Zachary Elliot. Most folks call me Zach." "Clara Nolan," she responded, wincing as he carefully felt around her ankle. "It's not broken, but it's a nasty sprain," he said, removing his bandana and dipping it in what little water remained in one of the buckets. He wrapped the cool cloth around her ankle with unexpected tenderness. "You shouldn't be walking on this." "I don't have much choice," Clara said. "My father is expecting this water and he can't fetch it himself." Zach glanced at the nearly empty buckets, then back to Clara. "Where's your home?" Clara pointed toward a small farmhouse visible in the distance. "And the creek," she gestured in the opposite direction. Without another word, Zach picked up both buckets. "I'll get you fresh water, then see you home." "That's very kind, but I couldn't impose no imposition, Miss Nolan," he said with a smile that transformed his weathered face. "I'll be back in a few minutes. Rest that ankle." Clara watched as he strode toward the creek, his confident gait and broad shoulders suggesting strength born of years of hard work. She wondered who this stranger was and what brought him to Sweetwater. True to his word, Zach returned quickly with both buckets full to the brim. He set them down carefully, then turned to Clara. "Now for the tricky part," he said. "I'm going to have to carry you." Clara felt her cheeks flush. "Mr. Elliot, that's not necessary, Zach," he corrected. "And it is necessary. You'll do that ankle no favors by walking on it." Before she could protest further, he scooped her up with one arm under her knees and the other supporting her back. Clara instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck, acutely aware of his proximity. "What about the water?" she asked, trying to distract herself from the unfamiliar sensation of being held against a man's chest. "I'll come back for it," Zach said, already carrying her toward the farmhouse. "You're lighter than those buckets anyway." Despite her embarrassment, Clara couldn't help but laugh. "I should hope so." As they approached the small farmhouse, the front door swung open. Clara's father, Thomas Nolan, appeared with concern etched on his weathered face. "Clara, What in heaven's name? His eyes narrowed at the sight of his daughter in a stranger's arms. "Papa, this is Mr. Zachary Elliot," Clara explained quickly. "I fell and twisted my ankle. He's been kind enough to help me." Thomas relaxed slightly but still eyed Zach with suspicion. "Bring her inside, then." Zach carried Clara into the modest home and gently set her down on a wooden chair. "Your daughter's ankle needs to be properly wrapped and rested, sir," he explained to Thomas. "I've left your water buckets back on the path. I'll fetch them now." "I'm obliged to you," Thomas said, his tone softening. "Clara's all I've got since my wife passed." "It was no trouble, sir," Zach replied, tipping his hat to Clara. "I'll be right back with your water." After Zach left, Thomas turned to his daughter with a raised eyebrow. "And who might this cowboy be?" "I don't know, Papa," Clara admitted. "He just appeared when I fell." "Said his name is Zachary Elliot." Thomas nodded slowly. "Well, we'll see what he has to say for himself when he returns." When Zach reappeared with the full water buckets, Thomas insisted he stay for supper as thanks. As they ate the simple meal of beans, cornbread, and dried beef that Clara had prepared the day before, they learned that Zach had recently taken a job at the Circle G ranch a few miles outside of town. "I've been working cattle since I was 13, Zach explained. "Started in Texas, then moved around some, followed the work where I could find it." "What brings you to Sweetwater specifically?" Thomas asked, still assessing the young man. "Heard Mr. Gentry was looking for experienced hands," Zach replied, "and I'd had my fill of Texas dust for a while." His eyes met Clara's briefly, and she found herself looking away, suddenly fascinated by the pattern of her plate. By the time Zach prepared to leave, the sun had begun its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Clara hobbled to the door to see him off, leaning on her father's arm for support. "Thank you again, Mr. Elliot," she said formally, aware of her father's watchful presence. "Zach," he reminded her with a smile, "and it was my pleasure, Miss Nolan." He tipped his hat and mounted his horse, a handsome chestnut gelding. "I hope that ankle heals quickly." As he rode away, Clara couldn't help but notice the empty feeling his departure left behind. The next few days passed slowly as Clara's ankle gradually improved. She found herself watching the road more often than necessary, wondering if Zach might ride by. On the fourth day, as she sat on the porch shelling peas, the familiar figure on horseback appeared in the distance. Clara straightened her dress and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, then immediately felt foolish for doing so. He was probably just passing by on ranch business. But Zach rode directly up to their house, dismounting with the same easy grace she remembered. "Good afternoon, Miss Nolan," he called. "I see you're up and about." "Mr. Elliot," she responded, smiling despite herself. "Yes, it's much better now, thank you. Glad to hear it." He removed his hat, revealing hair slightly damp with sweat. "I was heading into town for supplies and thought I'd check on you." He paused, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant. "And well, I wondered if you might need anything while I'm there." Clara was touched by his thoughtfulness. "That's very kind, but we're well stocked at present." Zach nodded, replacing his hat. An awkward silence stretched between them until he spoke again. "There's a social at the church this Saturday, dancing and such. I was wondering that is, if your ankle's well enough, if you might consider attending." "With me?" Clara felt her heart beat faster. "I'd have to ask my father." "Of course," Zach said quickly. "I wouldn't want to be improper." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Elliot," he acknowledged with a nod, "what brings you back this way?" Zach repeated his invitation, standing straight and speaking clearly as he addressed Clara's father. Thomas considered the young man for a long moment before responding. "I suppose that would be acceptable," he said finally, "provided you have her home at a reasonable hour." "Yes, sir." "Absolutely," Zach agreed, unable to hide his smile. He turned back to Clara. "I'll come by around 5 on Saturday then." Clara nodded, suddenly shy. "I'll be ready." Saturday arrived with agonizing slowness. Clara spent the morning cleaning the house and the afternoon preparing herself for the social. She wore her best dress blue cotton with small white flowers and arranged her hair in a style her mother had taught her years ago, pinning it up to reveal the slender curve of her neck. Thomas watched his daughter's preparations with a mixture of pride and concern. "You look like your mother," he said quietly as she emerged from her room, "just as beautiful." Clara hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Papa." When Zach arrived, dressed in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed, Thomas gave him a stern warning about proper behavior and a curfew of 9 o'clock. Zach agreed to all terms respectfully, and soon they were on their way to town, Clara riding side saddle on Zach's gelding while he led the horse on foot. The social was held in the cleared space beside the small white church, with lanterns strung between posts to provide light as the evening progressed. A makeshift platform held 3 musicians, a fiddler, a guitarist, and a man with a harmonica. Tables laden with food lined one side of the clearing, and most of Sweetwater's residents had turned out for the event. Clara knew many of the townspeople, having lived there for 3 years, but she noticed how several glances lingered on her and Zach as they arrived. It wasn't often that Clara Nolan attended social functions with a gentleman. "Would you care for some punch?" Zach asked after helping her dismount. "Yes, thank you," Clara replied, smoothing her skirts nervously. As Zach went to fetch their drinks, Martha Wilson, the shopkeeper's wife, sidled up to Clara. "Well, well," she said with a knowing smile. "Who's the handsome cowboy?" Clara felt her cheeks warm. "Zachary Elliot. He's working at the Circle G." Martha nodded appreciatively. "About time you had some company your own age, dear. You spend too much time cooped up on that farm with your father." Before Clara could respond, Zach returned with 2 cups of punch. He nodded politely to Martha, who gave Clara a wink before moving away to greet other guests. "Everyone seems very friendly," Zach observed, handing Clara her drink. "Sweetwater is a good community," Clara agreed. "Small enough that everyone knows everyone, but not so small that they're in each other's business all the time." She paused, considering. "Well, not too much anyway." Zach laughed, a warm sound that made Clara smile in response. As the evening progressed, they sampled the potluck offerings and chatted with various townspeople. Zach was respectful and charming, making a favorable impression on Clara's neighbors and friends. When the music began in earnest, Zach turned to Clara. "May I have this dance, unless your ankle is still troubling you?" "It's fine now," Clara assured him, placing her hand in his outstretched one. "I'd be happy to dance." The musicians struck up a lively tune, and Zach led Clara onto the dance floor. He was a surprisingly good dancer, guiding her through the steps with confidence. Clara, who had rarely danced since coming west, followed his lead with growing assurance. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked as they circled each other. "My mother insisted all her boys learn," Zach explained. "Said no son of hers would stand against the wall like a fence post at socials. Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Zach said, a shadow crossing his features briefly. "She passed 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," Clara said softly, understanding the loss all too well. "My mother died 4 years ago. It's what prompted Papa to move west. Too many memories in Pennsylvania." "It seems we have that in common then," Zach said, his hand tightening slightly around hers. "My father sold the family ranch after Mother died. My brothers scattered to different territories. I've been on my own since." As they continued to dance, Clara felt a connection forming between them, a shared understanding of loss and resilience. When the music slowed, Zach's hand on her waist guided her closer, and Clara found herself looking into those sky-blue eyes, feeling something stir within her that she hadn't experienced before. The next dance was a square dance that required changing partners, and Clara was momentarily separated from Zach. As she was passed from one partner to another, according to the dance's pattern, she caught sight of Zach dancing with the banker's daughter, a pretty blonde girl named Abigail Peters. A surprising twinge of jealousy made Clara miss a step, causing her current partner to stumble. "Sorry," she murmured, quickly regaining the rhythm. When the dance ended, Clara made her way back to where she had left her punch cup, needing a moment to collect herself. She was being ridiculous. She barely knew Zachary Elliot. "There you are," Zach's voice came from behind her. "I was afraid I'd lost you in the crowd." Clara turned, composing her features into a smile. "It's getting rather busy." It is, he agreed, glancing around at the gathering. Would you like to step outside for a bit? Get some fresh air? Clara hesitated, knowing that propriety suggested they remain in plain sight. But the evening was warm, and the thought of a quiet moment away from the crowd was appealing. Just for a minute, she conceded. They walked to the edge of the churchyard, where the lantern light faded into the deeper shadows of evening. The stars were emerging in the darkening sky, and a crescent moon hung low on the horizon. It's beautiful out here, Zach said, looking up at the vast expanse above them. In the city, you can't see half as many stars. Have you lived in cities then? Clara asked, curious about his past. For a time in San Francisco, Zach replied. After leaving Texas, I thought I might try something different. Lasted 6 months before the walls started closing in on me. He shook his head ruefully. Some men aren't meant for city living. And you're one of them. I need open spaces, he confirmed. Room to breathe, to see the horizon. Clara nodded, understanding completely. That's why Papa chose this place. He said the mountains back east were beautiful, but they hemmed him in. Here, he can see for miles. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the music and laughter from the social a distant backdrop to the night sounds around them, crickets chirping, the occasional hoot of an owl. Clara, Zach said finally, turning to face her. I know we've only just met, but I've enjoyed your company tremendously. I was wondering if I might call on you properly sometime. Clara felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. I would like that, she admitted. Your father seems like a fair man, but protective, Zach continued. I respect that. I'd like to earn his trust. He's been my only family since Mother died, Clara explained. And life out here hasn't been easy for him. The farm doesn't yield much, but he's too proud to leave. It takes courage to stay and fight for what's yours, Zach said. I admire that. Their conversation was interrupted by the church bell, ringing 8 times. Clara realized with a start that they needed to begin heading back to the farm to meet her father's curfew. The ride home was peaceful, with Clara once again on Zach's horse while he walked alongside. They talked easily, sharing stories of their childhoods and discovering more common ground despite their different upbringings. When they reached the Nolan farm, Thomas was waiting on the porch, his expression inscrutable in the dim light of the oil lamp beside him. Right on time, he observed as Zach helped Clara dismount. Yes, sir, Zach replied. We had a lovely evening. Thomas nodded, his eyes moving between the two young people. Clara, would you mind starting the kettle? I'd like a word with Mr. Elliot. Clara looked uncertainly at Zach, who gave her a reassuring nod. Of course, Papa, she said, squeezing Zach's hand briefly before going inside. Once Clara was inside, Thomas stepped down from the porch to stand eye to eye with Zach. My daughter seems to have taken a shine to you, Elliot. Sir, I hold Clara in the highest regard, Zach began, but Thomas raised a hand to stop him. I'm not finished. Clara's mother was the love of my life. When she died, something in me died too. I brought Clara out here to give her a fresh start, but I've realized lately that I've been holding her back. She's a young woman now, not a child. He paused, his voice softening. I saw how she looked at you tonight. It's the first time I've seen that spark in her since we left Pennsylvania. Zach remained silent, sensing there was more. I don't know you well, Elliot, Thomas continued, but I know Clara. She's a good judge of character. If she sees something worthwhile in you, there must be something there. All I ask is that you be honest with her and with me. You have my word, sir, Zach replied solemnly. Thomas extended his hand, which Zach shook firmly. You're welcome to call on Clara then, during daylight hours, mind you. Thank you, Mr. Nolan. I appreciate your trust. As summer progressed into fall, Zach became a regular visitor at the Nolan farm. He would ride over after his work at the ranch, sometimes helping Thomas with chores before supper, other times taking Clara for short rides to enjoy the spectacular Arizona sunsets. Their courtship proceeded with proper decorum under Thomas's watchful eye, but there were precious moments of privacy, hands touching while picking vegetables from the garden, a brief kiss stolen behind the barn when Thomas went to town for supplies. Clara found herself thinking of Zach constantly, his laugh, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, how his calloused hands could be so gentle. She knew she was falling in love with him, but the thought both thrilled and frightened her. Zach was a cowboy, used to moving with the seasons and the work. What if Sweetwater was just another temporary stop for him? Her fears surfaced one evening in late September as they sat on the porch after supper, Thomas having gone inside to read his Bible by the lamp. "Winter will be here before we know it," Clara remarked, watching the first stars appear in the twilight sky. Zach agreed, his arm resting comfortably along the back of the bench they shared. "The aspens up in the high country are already turning gold." Clara hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "Will you stay through the winter, at the Circle G, I mean?" Zach turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Is that what's been bothering you these past few days, whether I'll move on?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Clara," Zach said softly, taking her hand in his. "I've done my share of wandering. When I came to Sweetwater, I was looking for work, nothing more. But then I met this stubborn woman with auburn hair who was trying to carry water buckets on a sprained ankle." Despite her anxiety, Clara smiled at the memory. "I'm not planning to leave," Zach continued. "In fact, I've been talking with Mr. Gentry about taking on more responsibility at the ranch. He's getting older and has no sons to pass it on to. He's mentioned that he might be looking for a foreman soon." "That's wonderful," Clara said, relief washing over her. "You'd be perfect for that position." "There's something else I've been thinking about," Zach said, his voice taking on a nervous quality Clara had never heard before. "Something far more important than any job." He shifted on the bench to face her directly, still holding her hand in his. "Clara Nolan, these past months have been the happiest of my life. I never expected to find someone like you, but now that I have, I can't imagine my life without you in it." Clara's heart began to race as Zach reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. "This was my mother's," he said, opening his palm to reveal a simple gold band with a small pearl. "I've carried it with me since she died, waiting for the right person." He took a deep breath. "Clara, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Clara's eyes as joy overwhelmed her. "Yes," she whispered, then more loudly, "Yes, Zach, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit as if made for her. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, a kiss full of promise and love. The sound of the door opening caused them to break apart. Thomas stood in the doorway, a knowing look on his face. "I take it I'll be gaining a son-in-law," he said, his gruff tone belied by the moisture in his eyes. "Yes, Papa," Clara confirmed, showing him the ring. "Zach has asked me to marry him." Thomas nodded solemnly. "And I suppose you said yes." "I did." Thomas stepped forward, extending his hand to Zach. "Welcome to the family, son. Though I expect you've already figured out what you're getting yourself into with this one." "I have, sir," Zach replied, shaking Thomas's hand firmly, "and I couldn't be happier about it." The wedding took place in November, a simple ceremony in Sweetwater's church with the entire town in attendance. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered to fit her slender frame, and carried a bouquet of dried wildflowers preserved from the summer. Zach, looking both nervous and elated, waited for her at the altar in a new suit purchased specifically for the occasion. When Clara appeared at the back of the church on her father's arm, Zach's expression of wonder and love brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the preacher asked. "I do," Thomas replied, placing Clara's hand in Zach's before stepping back, his duty fulfilled. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with Clara and Zach exchanging vows they had written themselves. As the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zach bent to kiss his bride, sealing their commitment amid cheers and applause from their friends and neighbors. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed half the territory. As the night grew late, Zach and Clara bid farewell to their guests and rode to the small cabin Zach had been preparing on the edge of the Circle G property, where they would begin their life together. "Welcome home, Mrs. Elliot," Zach said, lifting Clara from the wagon and carrying her across the threshold. The cabin was simple but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, sturdy furniture Zach had either built or purchased, and colorful quilts Clara had contributed to their new home. A fire was already burning in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the room. "It's perfect," Clara whispered, taking in the space that was now theirs. Zach set her gently on her feet but kept his arms around her waist. "We'll build something bigger eventually," he promised. "When we're ready for a family of our own." Clara leaned into his embrace, feeling completely content. "There's no rush, we have all the time in the world." As winter settled over the Arizona territory, Clara and Zach established their routine as a married couple. Zach worked long hours at the ranch, often returning home after dark, while Clara managed their household and began planning a garden for the spring. Thomas remained on his farm but was a frequent visitor, gradually adapting to his new role as father-in-law. On Christmas Eve, a rare snowfall blanketed the landscape, transforming the desert into a wonderland of white. Zach and Clara, along with Thomas, gathered in the cabin to exchange simple gifts and share a special meal. "I have something for you," Zach said to Clara after Thomas had retired to the spare room for the night. He retrieved a package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string from beneath their small Christmas tree. Clara unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful leather-bound journal. "Oh, Zach," she breathed, running her fingers over the cover. "You mentioned once that your mother kept a journal," Zach explained. "I thought you might like to start your own, to write about our life together." Clara kissed him tenderly. "It's perfect, thank you." She hesitated, then added, "I have something for you too, but it's not something I could wrap." Zach looked at her curiously. "What is it?" Clara took his hand and placed it gently on her abdomen. "We're going to have a baby," she said softly, "in summer." Zach's eyes widened, and for a moment he seemed unable to speak. Then he let out a whoop of joy and gathered Clara into his arms, spinning her around the room. "A baby," he exclaimed. "Our baby. Oh, Clara, that's the most wonderful news," Clara laughed, clinging to his shoulders. "Put me down, you fool, you'll wake Papa." Zach set her on her feet but kept his hands on her waist, his expression one of pure wonder. "When did you know?" "I've suspected for a few weeks," Clara admitted, "but I wanted to be sure before I told you. Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Zach said, kissing her soundly. "I'm going to be a father. We're going to be parents." As they stood together before the fire, arms around each other, Clara marveled at how much her life had changed in the span of a single year. From the day she fell with those water buckets to this moment, anticipating the birth of their child, she had found a love and happiness she never could have imagined. "What are you thinking?" Zach asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about how we met," Clara replied. "How you carried me in those water buckets," Zach chuckled. "Best thing I ever did, stopping to help a stubborn woman who wouldn't admit she was hurt." "I wasn't being stubborn," Clara protested. "I was being independent. You were being stubborn," Zach insisted, grinning. "Thankfully, I'm equally stubborn, or we might never have gotten here." Clara couldn't argue with that. Instead, she nestled closer into his embrace, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together and the love that had grown between them, a love as vast and enduring as the western sky above them. As the fire crackled and the snow continued to fall outside their window, Clara Nolan Elliot knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, the cowboy who had carried her home and the woman who had captured his heart.